What's up, Digidestins? Happy America Day, aka Independence Day, July 4th of July. For anybody in the US, hopefully you guys are celebrating and having a good time with your families, friends. I will be live streaming a little bit later today for Kingdom Hearts. I want to be able to live stream some Ex-06 games, but at the moment I can't do that besides webcams, and I don't know if anybody actually has enough webcam product. So, but without further ado, let's dive in the video and talk about my top 10 picks for the Digimon TCG. So without further ado, let's get into this video. We're going to talk about my 10 picks for the July regional season. This will cover decks that you'll be seeing for the major, store regionals, the online regionals, the in-person regionals, until we get to BT17. But there is potential here with Digimon. First, let's talk about Digimon itself. In JP, it topped at least 11 times, which is nothing too crazy to scoff at. It had a lot of potential, can do a lot of things that it needs to, especially under the right circumstances. If you can make sure your tokens come out and your opponent can't just clear them with, let's say, a Valkyrie Ace or something like that, you're kind of in a good spot. But if you are facing decks that are like Valkyrie Ace and Ruin mode, this deck does fall out really quickly, but I feel like it has a lot of potential, and there's going to be a lot of Digimon fans just bringing this deck in and trying their best at getting that W. But all turns, when Digivolving effects of level 7s don't activate, but the Armageddon just gives you that rush aspect and kind of gets you that lethal for game. You have the Digimon aces to help, if you're already wide, to answer board states. I did play Infernal here just so that we could possibly get a little bit. All turns, all your other Digimon with the same name as this Digimon gets plus 2000 DP. If you can get two of these Infernals out, all of a sudden your tokens are now at 7,000 DP threshold, and now you kind of can survive a little bit better than what your opponent is threatening you with. And it is a decent deck. You have Catastrophe Cannon to de-digivolve and produce a token if you're on a Digimon. So majorly of this deck's core issues is it lives and dies by the errata. If you can't spam out your tokens fast enough, and not see an errata as soon as possible, you're going to be in a bad spot. All your effects trigger when you play a same Digimon. We are also playing the decoy here. The reason for this is that it makes your tokens now have a decent decoy lineup here, and being able to protect the big stack that's going to be producing tokens turn after turn is going to help out, because I also am a big fan of the gaining the memory one. I think it's vitally, this should be our ratio for champions for the level 4 lineup for the foreseeable future. It's just that good of a level 4 lineup. And then our Caramon's going to change up a little bit in here once we get the BT17 stuff, but I think this deck has a lot of good potential and it can apply a lot of pressure. And being able to search out everything by its bottom end is really good. Even though defensive trading will whiff on Quartz and Armageddon, it's not that bad of a deal, right? I think all in all, we're finally into the top end being the right color it needs to be. That was one of the biggest problems with Digimon, was that memory trainings, you would not be able to grab the Digimon at all. With now being Ace and the regular Digimon, we're now up to a point where we have access to what we need. So all in all, though, the deck has a lot of potential. Then we have 7 Great Demon Lords. I think this deck is going to do some crazy shenanigans, especially on Saturday. We're going to see a lot of this pop up, and the deck is starting to do stuff at the local levels really well as well. It's Royal Knights, but with a better win con, in my opinion. Getting Ogurumon out is a lot easier than getting the 13 different names for your, Omnimon to kind of just go off and just do what it needs to. I mean, yeah, both decks are great decks to really have to deal with, and there's all contenders and stuff like that. To keep yourself straight here, do keep in mind that we can substitute to put in Pork-Up Mons and stuff like that, just to help answer the Pillow Mons and other things that our players are going to start building up on. So just keep this in mind. But the deck is relatively simple. It just wants to go at it, your opponent, and just go hard here. Your opponent has to deal with a lot of your threats, and let's be honest, turn after turn playing a level 6 for reduced cost is just ridiculous at the end of the day. But, you know, options are great. We have Rival Barrage, Biting Crush, 7-fold Cluster. If you get Beelzemon X live, you know, all this stuff adds up pretty quickly, because once you get the Ugudamon push turn, you're really solid. So I can't wait to see where people kind of build and what happens this weekend. Then we have Phoenixmon. Phoenixmon's similar playstyle by having a big boss Digimon gets around some decks that really have a hard time dealing with sticky bodies. So big thing about Phoenixmon is that I think this deck is a really good contender because of its abilities. Being able to have, like, Phoenixmon be able to, you may play one red Digimon with ADM, Bird, Beast Animal, Sovereign, or other than Sea Animal in its traits with 11,000 DP or less from your hand without paying its cost. Delete one of your opponent's Digimon with DP less than or equal to the DP of that Digimon played. Being able to trigger Phoenixmon X's your turn while a Phoenixmon or X antibodies Digivolutions add end of attack to all your on deletion effects is really good, and it has a blitz effect as well. So as long as this thing survives, you're going to be spamming out bodies and make your opponent have a bad time. Sora combos really nicely with the deck because you're able to, you know, cycle back cards, and then you may play one red Avion, 13,000 DP or less from him without paying cost for each security your opponent has. Subtract 2,000 DP from this effect is crazy to me. A lot of this has some good potential, and I'm excited to see where it goes because of how it plays. I played against this. This is definitely a big learning curve for a lot of people, and I'm not even joking. Be ready for this deck to pop in or out of locals. Then we do have, or even just regionals, Tyrant. Tyrant's still decent, and people are still trying to figure out how to get this deck to work. I feel like we have a good foundation going for it. It just, I think also losing out on next set Shibamon Ace is going to really hurt this deck a little bit. I think Shibamon Ace was just one of those cards you can't afford not having. But at the moment, we're looking pretty solid across the board. You know, the Izzy's. Tyrant's just a big dude, and if you can get the upper hand and get a stabilized board, Tyrant's very hard to get rid of. Tyrant hits big, hits like a truck, and it's just going to do what you need it to do. At the end of the day, you know, the combination of being able to play a free body, be able to warp into Tyrant for reduced costs, or just getting into Tyrant, not caring about the cost, is all you need. And especially with giving it alliance with the Lotmon effect, making it so now you can suspend one of your bigger guys, make him bigger, and just hit for 2 security checks. Really nasty. I mean, at the end of the day, the deck has all the tools it needs, and I think we will see more and more of it going in the future. Then we have Fenry Luga. Fenry Luga is definitely one of those decks you see a lot going on with it. You know, the deck isn't slowing down anytime soon. The deck has a lot of potential to be able to keep playing even when you pass turn, and then getting it to just keep swinging in and just apply pressure is really scary for your opponent to deal with. You know, the analog youth, if your stack disappears, can bring you back to your turn depending on how many analog youths are and where your memory stack is. You know, getting the alliance and blocker effect can really apply pressure, especially because you can unsuspend very easily in your deck. It just all adds up, and your opponent has to deal with it. And the only problem I see is that Infernal Dramon definitely cakewalks this deck a little bit too much, because you can't unsuspend once the Pyldra goes off. And then the other deck I really think you have a big trouble handling is the Neweon deck. It's just a little bit too fast for you. I mean, you could go off and pop off if you're a really good player. The deck definitely succeeds there, but one blast ace wrong move and your setup plays kind of just get screwed. So all in all, though, I think the deck has a lot of potential, and I don't disagree with this. Then we do have the Pyron Dramon deck. Pyron Dramon, as I said, can cakewalk a lot of these prior decks just because it shuts down and locks your opponent out of doing things. And with the fact that we have Infernal Dramon Dragon Mode, if your opponent Blast Ace on your turn, you just laugh at them, because that Blast Ace now just gets you into your Paladin mode, your fighter mode actually, and then you just spin back the ace and you just gain all the memory back. So your opponent's definitely going to have not the easiest cakewalk in the world against this deck. The deck has a lot of potential. The deck is an OTK fiend, and being able to do some stun locking that forces your opponent to not be able to unsuspend blanket is ridiculous to me. Then we have Mirage. As you know, guys, Mirage is just the OTK king. This thing just gained abilities with, you know, doesn't need to use Buku, really. It's got Betamon. If it gets Betamon in the stack, it's just going to jam swing, or even just getting this Galgamon here, jam swing, and your opponent's just not going to have a good time. This allows your opponent to go up in cards too with the Galgamon here early on, and now your opponent has to deal with it, because that Galgamon just going to apply that pressure really easily. That jamming plus the, you know, both players add the top card of their deck just means that even though they were trying to keep their hand small, you could lead to getting them to 8 as soon as possible, and your opponent's just going to have a bad time. You know, Mirage himself is just annoying to deal with, because any time a card is added to by the effect, once per turn at least, you know, that could easily push it back to your turn if they have to dig a little deeper just to get there. So stuff like that does matter. And then you have like burst mode being burst mode and just getting more unsuspend multi-attacking in. Then we do have Yellow Vaccine. Yellow Vaccine armors, which is just Rapids and Magna X's. The deck, even if I found this interesting enough, was that Eagle Nest Gaming hosts on Mondays. They had a restriction list bringing Magna X to 1. All they did was take Magna X, take it out, bumped up Rapidmon X antibody to a full play set, then put in fewer smaller techs in the Mega lineup, and boom, they were still doing the same shenanigans. The deck still took first place. So it shows that the deck is just extremely powerful in generalization. You know, the Pillowmon is definitely going to help up against, you know, the 7 Great Demon Lord decks and, you know, the Neweon matchup. So all this does eventually add up pretty quickly. And, you know, Emperors just slow down the Numes. So if your opponent has to get around the turtle, it's going to take them some time and resources because of how the deck operates. And the fact that Patamon basically skips evolves into Rapids for free makes your opponent just have a bad time, because then all of a sudden you can just go either Ace into Magna X, or you go into Awakening the Golden Digizord to warp into Magna X, and your opponent's just really having to answer this big boy that just has so much protections. Is really hard for some decks in the long term. Then we do have Blue Imperial Dramon, well, Blue Armors. Blue Armors definitely one of those better decks too. Just with the combination of like Final Zubergon Punch, this is now, because you hit comfortably into 15, 16 with Final Zubergon Punch, you're clearing 2 securities, gains reboot. So even if you swing twice, it's going to unsuspend itself on your opponent, ready to stop them from doing anything more. And that's crazy to me. This deck has a lot of scary potential. You know, Shu just being in here for that alliance to make it even bigger can get out of hand. Magna X's at least help bounce threats that have low, you know, for each color of one of your opponent's Digimon has, trash the top Digivolution card, then return one of your opponent's Digimon with no Digivolution cards. It's just how that goes. I mean, this deck is scary. It's one of those decks, especially because Magna X is just a turtle deck. It hits like a truck, and it's going to be hard for your opponent to deal with, especially with Heaven's Judgment being able to help remove threats off the board too. Your opponent's just going to have a bad time. Then we get Neweon as one of the better decks, and my number 1 pick, to be honest with you. This deck is very budget friendly at most instances. This deck doesn't run too much. I mean, Ruin Mode is really what sets you back. This thing probably isn't going to break more than $100 normally without the Ruin Mode. So now Ruin Mode just brings it into 180 range, which at the end of the day, that's still not bad. I mean, the fact that you have access to Edamon here, that you're just going to force your opponent to swing in just so you go into Valkyrie Ace, they'll swing into the stack, you just clear it, you basically activate your effects. Edamon basically gets you into the Valkyrie, minusing it, If they hit it, you'll pop the stack, and if it was an ace you targeted, then your opponent's just gonna hate their lives. I mean, Edamon is just one of those annoying cards because you can't stop it because it's at the start of main phase, so you have to immediately do something with it. So stuff like that is very important, especially when you're trying to force attacks and do stuff. I think you have a lot of potential going forward. So I think these are the big 10. I think number 10 can be interchanged with so many decks in the format. I just figured Diaboromon definitely has a shot. I mean, Ragna could be definitely here. You know, Mastemon could definitely be here. Depends on the build and the person. I mean, there's also a bunch of decks from BT16 that are still doing good. I think majorly from EX6, Demon Lords are what came in. And that is where I think that's basically the only real deck that makes it into the top 10 very comfortably. Everybody else, it's kind of interchangeable on the 10th slot because there's just so many decent tier 2 decks that can do well and top in an event. So I definitely think there's a lot of possibilities. So let me know down in the comments what you think number 10 should be. And guys, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, stay safe, stay healthy, and I'll catch you next one. Peace.